Joining us now, John Najarian, the co-owner of Market Rebellion, is here to discuss all things chip space, particularly. We'll start with Intel. John, let's talk some Intel. Obviously, a lot of news here breaking today in lieu of CEO retiring. What do you make of this?
This was not a decision that the individuals came to on their own. I think this was a pushing out of CEOs in both cases. I think the very similar to the push that you see when you watch the Philadelphia Eagles and their offensive line push for Jalen Hurts. I mean, this was not something that Pat Gelsinger wanted to do. He thought he was on track, apparently. The board did not think he was on track. They brought him back in 2021, and it just had not worked out. A number of initiatives were tried. One of those being that, hey, let's see if we can make chips for other companies, the other companies that design them, much like TSM, Taiwan Semiconductor, does so well. This just didn't seem to be the silver bullet or the positive that they needed, and certainly it wasn't going to get them there quick enough. So apparently the board just lost patience. Obviously, a lot of people were probably giving them a very hard time about the stock performance. The board members right there with them. I mean, the stock is down over 50% year to date. And even though it popped this morning to be a little bit of a gain, that quickly faded, and now it's down a full $1 from the opening and nearly $2 from the high of the day.
A little bit of a brotherly shove, John, of Pat perhaps out the door. But talk to me about, I mean, you said this is kind of, it had to happen in many ways, even if it was a tough decision. You had some stats year to date I saw in your notes of sort of the performance of Intel versus its peers. It's really not a pretty story when you look at it that way. I know that you like to look at kind of options activity and things, trying to see, a story there. Was there anything in Intel either last week or today that caught your eye?
There are, back in the middle of November, just a week after the election, there were some speculative trades, but they were way up at about the 40 strike, meaning, of course, that with the stock at $24, it would have to jump $16 to put those in the money. And that looks more like something somebody would do if they were short the shares and they just wanted to set an absolute limit to what they could lose if something good happened. That something good has not happened yet. And so the stock's still under pressure even after the co-CEOs were announced.
So, John, as we kind of put this in perspective here and compare it to its peers, obviously it's struggling. You can see that in the performance. It's not a one-year story. It's not a year-to-date story. It's really been multi-year. And in many ways, it's kind of fascinating that a company could fall so far to its peers with such a leadership position that it kind of came into the race with, kind of looking back over the last decade in the case of Intel. But this has been, I describe as kind of the biggest boon for semiconductors and chips since the dot-com era. Maybe you would agree, maybe you would disagree. Nonetheless, it's been a big growth opportunity for these companies. And it seems every other company is participating but Intel. Is that a fair assessment of this? And what does that mean for Intel and its peers going forward?
Well, I think you're spot on. This is not good for them versus their competition. I mean, even an AMD, for instance, that's only down 4% on the year, not down 50%. Like your chart showed, TSM is up over 85%, NVIDIA up over 180%, and that's just this year. It seems that perhaps Intel was really struggling with a number of its customers to remain relevant, really. I mean, AMD had been taking more and more data center space from them. Obviously, some of the big new initiatives that were started under Mr. Gelsinger had not borne fruit yet. They're pushing into AI, but they're competing with, people that have really made significant strides in AI that, quite frankly, Intel had not. And this new Gaudi accelerator, which is one of the ways that they'd hoped to really break into AI and data centers, that is not, the choice of people like, for instance, Elon Musk, who famously bought 6 figures worth of, and I don't mean dollars, I mean 100,000 of those chips that he could get from NVIDIA. I mean, that's pretty much just saying that to everybody else, this is the gauntlet's been thrown down, and they have certainly the pole position for anything AI related, and Intel was just not making it in that space. And like I say, that's why I think they tried to start saying, let's do the foundry stuff, let's get in here and make other people's chips. But Taiwan Semi is a very tough competitor. AMD is a tough competitor because they kept cutting prices on a lot of what they deliver to data centers, and that made it tougher and tougher on Intel to try to compete.
So, John, then final thoughts here. Is there a normalization that can happen, or is the damage kind of already done? Is it still sort of NVIDIA's, in the pole position as you describe, and it's not particularly close? Or is there a chance that Intel can kind of chip away at this over time and play a little catch-up over the next few years?
Well, I wouldn't count them out completely, but clearly the market has voted with its feet collectively by leaving this one in the dust and having all the others, with the exception of AMD, like I say, they're down 4% on the year. But it's a game where they need to reinvent themselves and probably focus on a single initiative rather than having 2 or 3 or 4 initiatives, because it's hard enough for a company as big as this. It's still a $103 billion company with an awful lot of employees and a lot of goodwill built up by Andy Grove and the previous CEOs. I think they really need to focus on a single delivery point over the next 6 months to get Wall Street back on their side.
And we'll see if that new leadership takes an approach similar to what you're describing or something else. But it seems change is certainly in store for the future for Intel. We'll see if it pays off. Appreciate you taking the time this afternoon, John. That's John Najarian, co-owner of Market Rebellion, with some thoughts on Intel.